Hey guys, it's Joe again. It's a week ago since I last updated you all. This is kind of unintentionally turned into a podcast every Friday, but I'm going to try to keep this one brief. But I do want to update. I appreciate all of you guys' prayers. I want to update you guys on what I've kind of gone through this week, where my thought process is, and just provide some hope for anyone that is going through trials or struggles or things like that. I was just going to open up with a couple verses from James chapter 1. It talks about how we should consider it joy when we go through trials, because that produces perseverance. I'm not necessarily at the stage where every trial I consider it joy, but I do recognize that there's a perseverance that comes to that. And then in Romans chapter 5 verse 3, it talks about we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into the hearts through the Holy Spirit who he has given to us. And so I'll come back to those, but I wanted to just kind of go over understanding that trials do produce perseverance and produce character traits in us, and talk about where we left off at the last video with the Israelites standing in the Jordan River, not necessarily seeing the same immediate deliverance that they had at the Red Sea. And these people initially were probably like, hey, let's get your popcorn ready, it's going to part the Jordan River. But now I'm standing here and I'm not seeing anything, and I'm praying and I'm hopeful and I have faith, but I don't see any deliverance, because what I talked about is God did things differently, and he stopped the water about 20 miles upstream in the area he called Zarethan. Maybe I pronounced that right, maybe not. But one aspect of God that I really struggle with understanding, and I don't know that I shouldn't necessarily understand it because I am not God, but it's just the idea of him being outside of time and just being at all places at all once at all times. But what I'm going to kind of get into kind of hints at that. The only way that I can somewhat wrap my head around is if I were to create, like, let's say an ant farm, a 12 by 12 little ant farm, put some baby ants in there. They're loving life. They're scurrying around. They're making their homes. They don't know that this whole other world exists outside of the framework that I created for them, outside of this box or whatever it is that I created for them. I'm not bound to that framework because I created that framework. I'm outside of that framework. Now, correlate that to God creating the universe, creating time. He's not bound by time. He can come in and interact and do things in this framework, but he's not bound. He's a creator of it. He's not bound to it. So that's the only way that I can wrap my head around it, but it still boggles my mind. But if you read, so let's go back to Joshua. They crossed the Jordan River at 1406 BC, roughly. Well, if you fast forward about 500 years, 440, in 1 Kings, they're about to build Solomon's temple. This is kind of a big deal, because this is where the Spirit of God is going to be dwelt. And it talks about the king had them carry clay molds in the plain of the Jordan River between Succoth and Zarethan. So if you remember that word, he's saying there's a great deal of resources at this Zarethan spot. And I have to only assume is because 500 years earlier, a great deal of water piled up there during the whole many hours or many days that it took for the water to be stopped at that region. So the water stops at that region, a whole bunch of sediment and resources and all this kind of stuff piles up in that area. And now 500 years later, God says, I want you to build my temple, and there's a great deal of resources over here where I piled up that water. And so the temple is not just like, hey, let's go build a church. The temple back then this is where the Spirit of God is going to be dwelt. This is where priests can come periodically and meet with God, because Old Testament time the Holy Spirit wasn't in all of us like it is now post Jesus. But so that was the place where God was going to dwell for the Israelites. So this is a big time deal doing that, building that temple. And it's kind of crazy to think about. One of the reasons why the Israelites had to endure the delay of their deliverance at the Jordan River and standing there questioning what they're doing. Why is God doing this? Why didn't he just part the river like he did the Red Sea? Why didn't I see immediate results to our prayers or to our hopes? Might have been because he knew 500 years later, I needed those resources to help provide for the Israelites at that time. And so he's working, it still is kind of crazy to me. What I think about is he's working this cosmic time-based tapestry he's building, where he's saying, I'm sorry that you guys have to go through this right now, but I'm going to use this to help this person, your grandkids 200 years from now, I'm going to use this to produce some measure of perseverance, to produce some measure additional character trait that you need that's going to help your kids and grandkids. Maybe it's going to help someone, hundreds of years from now. I don't think he is put necessarily the sickness in me, but if I am going through this, yes, I would love, and I do believe 1,000% God could snap his fingers and I could be healed. And I recognize I haven't been up until now, but I don't necessarily want that to happen if I'm still supposed to have some character trait grown in my life that may help my grandkids, that may help a group of people 500 years from now. I don't know this huge cosmic tapestry that God is building, but I know that he can do it because he did it in the Bible with that, where he did one thing one way and that helped another group of people 500 years from now. So it's just kind of helps during those times of troubles to be like, I don't know why I'm going through this or why anyone's going through anything, but if you think about it, like, hey, this could be used to not only benefit me and character development, but to benefit kids, grandkids, ancestors, makes it a lot more tolerable. So that was just an interesting thing to think about. So this past week, I mentioned a couple weeks ago was really rough. Past week, I saw a period of stableness. Numbers still not good, but not going down. And I'll just keep it with the hemoglobin number because there's dozens of numbers they're tracking. But hemoglobin number is the one that they monitor closely for blood transfusions. I'm still getting shots to help stimulate white blood cells, shots to help stimulate red blood cells, things like that. But hemoglobin last week, both Monday and Friday was 8.2. This past week, we had Labor Day, so they checked it on Tuesday. It was 8.0. There was several markers. I mean, they labeled that mostly stable. Several markers and associated with that would just tick down a tiny bit. There was a couple that ticked better in the positive direction. So, and then I did start getting more tired as the week went on. So I was kind of coin flip on whether I was going to need a transfusion today. I got blood results, hemoglobin's up to 8.5. So that is one of the highest it's been. I had one lab test of 8.7, but that's some of the highest it's been since I began this journey in July. So I am going to say that's another trickle of water, hope in my direction. I asked the doctor today, I know you're putting shots in me to stimulate these production of red blood cells, white blood cells, and things like that. How do I ever know if my body's actually taking over and doing that on its own, or if it's just reacting to the stimulant? And he just continued to kind of reiterate, we're working on two different things. I'm kind of a mystery. If I had aplastic anemia and just also acquired parvovirus as part of that, there's no medical cure for aplastic anemia outside of going through the 3-month bone marrow transplant process, which again, I'll walk through if that's something that is in my future, but it's preferably I don't go through the 3 months away and the chemo and the radiation and all that kind of stuff. If I happen to get parvovirus and that induced all of these symptoms that leads to what looks like aplastic anemia, and then that treatment kicked the parvovirus, then there's optimism that my bone marrow could regenerate and start working on its own. So essentially he just said, we don't know, time will tell. If numbers keep improving, obviously then we can start reducing the medication and reducing the things that stimulate bone marrow. So that's what I'm going to keep praying for. I'm going to keep my arms raised again. I'm in the Jordan River. I saw a little trickle of stability last week. I saw a trickle of positivity this week, and I appreciate all your prayers. So that's where we are now. There's another glimmer of hope, and I'm going to keep stacking on glimmers of hope and staying positive throughout the process. A lot of you have asked where we are with the donor process, and on the background outside of this treatment that I'm getting locally, the University of Minnesota has actively been looking for donors through their database. They first start with siblings. My siblings weren't the best match, so they found a handful of people that would be solid matches. They're doing follow-ups with some of them. Obviously, they have to come in and get further labs and get approved, and there's just be this whole logistical thing of either flying them in or getting their bone marrow here sometime, because it has to come while I'm in the chemo process if I have to go that route. But I'm thankful that there are solid matches, that if that we need to walk down that road, that it high probability of a positive outcome. But we're still praying that it doesn't go that far. So the other thing, I'm also very thankful. Like I said, I had that week of 2 blood transfusions in 4 days, and now today marks 2 weeks from that last one. So again, another sign in the right direction that no blood transfusions has been 2 weeks, and I don't get another lab till Wednesday, so it'll be a week and a half. So that's where we are. Not out of the woods yet. My wife and I were discussing this. You guys can let me know. Is it out of the woods or out of the weeds? I don't know what the accurate phraseology should be. But none of my numbers are good. They're still highly suppressed, but they're heading in the right direction. And so continue on with the prayers, guys. I really appreciate that. Spiritually, I want to be seated on the rock, my rock, Jesus Christ, hands raised in victory. And you guys are helping me so much with that, with your responses, with your replies, with your encouraging words, with your prayers, and just reaching out. Really appreciate that. So I'll keep the updates coming as I get more information. But thank you all. Love you all. And have a great weekend.